Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly discuss the pros and cons of Mikel Arteta's 3-2-2-3 build-up and Arsenal's narrow 2-0 win against Athletic Club in their Champions League opener. So when we break it all down and we do look at the board, we have Arsenal in a 4-3-3, with the solitary change being Merino joining Zubamendi and Rice in the midfield as Odegaard was unavailable and Arteta opted to not go at Neri. And then Athletic Club starting in a 4-2-3-1, but as that game progressed in the early stages, you witnessed them drop off into a 4-4-2 out of possession. They could press high or they could stand in a mid block, and they were very compact in the gaps between the midfield and the back line and the midfield and the front too. And it was clear that their initial intent was to ensure that Arsenal couldn't play through central areas, and you witnessed that as they had their front two doing a very good job of blocking off the passing lanes and towards that midfield zone. And rather than solely looking to step towards the center backs to apply pressure, when Arsenal had either Rice or Zubamendi dropping off deeper in between the center backs, they ensured that they had 2v1 in those zones. Initially, it was Rice splitting the two center backs, and you'd see Zubamendi and Merino in that central midfield zone. And from there, you would witness Timber and Calafiori a slight bit higher than the center backs, but they weren't pushing it into advanced areas to peg back the wide players who were tucking into narrow positions. Essentially, Athletic Club could go 3v3 in that midfield zone as they'd have Sansei sitting on the deepest midfielder, and then the two double pivot midfielders tracking the movement of either Zubamendi and Merino or Rice or Merino. Initially, Calafiori wasn't inverting and he was pushing forward in that left back zone, and you would see Eze tucking into more central areas in the gap between the right Athletic Club wide player and the right central midfielder. The issue here was that Rice and Zubamendi were dropping so deep that Athletic Club could simply have their front two closing them down. Merino was in advanced positions between the lines, but Arsenal couldn't play through that midfield. And then Eze was also in those advanced positions as they were creating that box midfield, and they could simply have an Athletic Club midfielder sitting on him, or they could push a center back two-step high to apply pressure if that Athletic Club midfield was bypassed. Eze's positioning in that central area wasn't long-lived, and you'd often see him swap with Calafiori, and now it's Calafiori pushing into those advanced positions. But when they looked to create that 3-2-2-3, Arsenal simply couldn't play through the midfield zone because, like I said, the hosts had their front two sitting on the deepest midfielder. Merino wasn't in a position where he could receive the ball, and whether it be Rice or Zubamendi dropping into central areas, Athletic Club had numbers to apply pressure to ensure that they couldn't receive the ball freely. If Calafiori pushed a bit higher, they could simply have their center back stepping towards him, but they didn't categorize the Arsenal defender as a legitimate threat to apply pressure towards him. However, when Calafiori was deeper, now you could see Rice dropping off deeper and Zubamendi in deep positions. Athletic Club had numbers for that, and from there the host could simply attach a central midfielder two-step to Calafiori, and the other one would deal with Merino's positioning higher up the pitch. And then even in the second half, it didn't really matter because you would still have Rice dropping into an inside left or right position to get on the ball, and once again it'd be Merino and Calafiori being closed down by the two double pivot midfielders, and Athletic Club could simply throw one attacking player on Zubamendi and the other on Rice. And that was one of the biggest issues that Arsenal had in terms of building and attempting to bypass Athletic Club's front six. Essentially, this did force Arsenal to play through the sides, and when they looked to break down the left-hand side, they simply didn't get enough from the Calafiori-Eze combination, and when they attempted to break down that side, Eze was often not combining with his teammates, or he was often looking to drift central and he wasn't being direct, and it was a completely different approach to what Arsenal were getting down the right-hand side. This isn't to say that Eze didn't have any few bright moments down that left-hand side, but it was nothing impactful in the final third that caused the Athletic Club backline any issues. Whereas on the right-hand side, the key battle of the game was Madueke against Adama, but what helped Athletic Club here was that Adama often had help from either a center back or a wide player, whether it be Berenguer or Navarro, that was shifting across to ensure that he wasn't always in 1v1 situations. Madueke was often looking to cut towards the outside, but in those scenarios, Adama often had help, and you would have a center back also willing to shift across to ensure that Madueke couldn't serve as a reliable creator down that flank. In the scenarios where he was 1v1 against Adama, you could see him playing poor crosses into the box that the goalkeeper was able to deal with. There was a moment where he did combine with Timber to get beyond Adama, but even in that situation, you see a center back coming across to ensure that he couldn't play the ball back towards Gyökeres, and that broke up the play for Arsenal down that right-hand side. There was a scenario scenario where he received the ball from Timber to get into a 1v1 against Adama, but even in that scenario where he looked to cut across the Athletic Club fullback, there was help coming across to ensure that he had to rush his shot and fire a low effort at the goalkeeper. In many of these scenarios where Arsenal were able to play through the sides, it was down to the fact that Athletic Club's approach out of possession was so narrow. So if the Arsenal fullbacks just stayed in their natural positions, there would always be an outlet for them to receive the ball, and from there they would have to force the Athletic Club wider players that were in narrow positions to shift out towards them, and they would have enough time and space to play the ball out towards the wide players to get them into 1v1s, as they were often isolated against the fullbacks. Essentially, from a basic perspective, what would have been very easy for Arsenal here would simply to rely on the center backs or Raya to play the ball and bypass the Athletic Club front six and clip it over to Eze or Madueke so that they could instantly get into 1v1s against the Athletic Club fullbacks, because as you can see, they were having troubles playing through that midfield zone, and although getting the ball towards Calafiori and Timber were an option, they could simply get those attacking wide players out in 1v1s quicker without support being played in towards them. Essentially, this simply sums up why majority of Arsenal's best chances in this game stemmed from them winning possession in the middle third or their own third, and quickly shifting the ball out and towards the wider areas to get their attacking players to run at the back line. You could look to one example where Calafiori wins the ball in the midfield zone and drops the ball back to Zubamendi, and he instantly plays the ball across the Athletic Club midfield bank to get Madueke in a 1v1, but as you can see, there's enough cover shifting across to help out Adama, and when Madueke looks to drag the ball across the fullback towards the byline on the outside, he simply is stopped by Adama, who does well to track his movement, and that halts the attack. So it was clear that Arsenal were struggling to bypass Athletic Club's front six, and one of their better chances in the second half stemmed through a simple mistake where Timber's on the ball and he drags a marker towards him, and Merino's marker simply steps towards Zubamendi because the Athletic Club front two can get towards him quickly. What ends up happening here is that Timber can now play the ball across his marker for Merino. Merino receives the ball and he drags away Adama towards him, which leaves Madueke free, and Merino simply instantly turns and plays the ball to Gyökeres, who now has the space to run across his center back because the other center back is pushed towards Madueke. Gyökeres does a very good job of holding off his defender, and Madueke can now break free down the right channel because the other center back is attracted to Gyökeres. From here, Madueke is able to carry the ball around the center back, but it's again the simple issue that Arsenal encountered in this game was that Madueke's final ball towards Gyökeres was poor, and he poked the ball across goal and the keeper was able to push it away. But in many of Arsenal's best chances throughout that game, it stemmed with them winning possession in their own third or Athletic Club being loose on the ball, and it's Merino simply getting on it and looking to play the ball across the center backs for Gyökeres breaking into the left channel. What often ended up happening here was that the Athletic Club fullbacks were aggressive on Eze and Madueke, so there was often space for Gyökeres to break in towards that channel, and even though he was able to get into good positions with Merino playing the ball towards him, he failed to make an impact when he broke into those positions. Essentially, Arteta will get credit for making the right substitutions, as they did have an impact in both goals by bringing on Trossard and Martinelli, and they did bring more of a different element in terms of their attack, in terms of Martinelli, in the sense that he was more direct and willing to run in behind in comparison to Eze. With Trossard, he didn't get much of a difference outside of the fact that he was willing to drop off deeper, but he wasn't dragging out center backs. If you look to the build up to their first goal, it's a simple defensive mistake from Athletic Club where they get defenders too high up the pitch and they aren't tight on their marker. So when Rice wins that second ball, it's simply Trossard getting to the ball before the center back steps and Martinelli's defender not being able to keep up with him. So Trossard just flicks it over the high center backs, and it allows Martinelli to break free on goal, where he does a very good job of stabilizing the ball, bringing it past the defender and getting himself into a position to put Arsenal ahead. But in terms of overall impact, yes, you witnessed Trossard drop off a bit deeper to serve as an outlet where we weren't getting that from Gyökeres, who was simply isolating the center backs. Essentially, the build up to Arsenal's second goal sums up the difference between Martinelli and Eze here, but again, it stems with Arsenal winning possession in the midfield zone, and once again, Merino instantly shifting the ball out towards Rice, who could then progress the play out towards Martinelli to get him into a 1v1. Martinelli slows down the play, but similar to what Madueke was doing, able to bring the ball towards the outside, get across the fullback, and here he was able to locate the good movement from Trossard, who was breaking in towards the 6-yard area, but then cut back across the center backs to receive the ball, take his time, and then get a lucky deflection off the defender to kill off the game. So as you can see, Arsenal experienced legitimate issues against a disciplined athletic club side from both central and wide areas, and while Mikel Arteta deserves credit for making the right personnel changes, even that decision didn't significantly shift the overall pattern nor tempo of the game.